For our members, when you look at the business end of 2016, when you look at the MENA Business Outlook, what we want to pay attention to is the political situation, unfortunately the perennial problems with what's happening in Iraq, Syria, Libya, Yemen. It's unfortunate to say, but it looks highly unlikely that we'll see any major breakthroughs in that area. In fact, if you look at what's happening in Syria with Recep Tayyip Erdogan's incursion, that could make things even more complicated. The Yemeni crisis continues, the peace talks are being knocked off track. So from a political point of view, we still have that, I suppose, perception problem of doing business in the Middle East. So that's certainly one area that's not going to improve. When we look at it from a pure business outlook or an economic perspective, you're looking at growth of around 2%, which isn't very inspiring, but when you compare it to what's happening around the world, it's actually pretty respectable. You have high inflation because of what's happening in Iran, in Egypt, in Yemen, so that spikes the inflationary picture. But overall, I would say that there are still opportunities here, but it really depends in which sectors that you're operating. Looking at the second half of 2016, if you're selling into consumers, what you need to realise is, and this is broadly speaking across the MENA region, you're seeing consumer confidence is softening. In the UAE, the latest batch of consumer confidence was actually an uptick, but I would actually question that data given the data that we collect from our polls. But broadly speaking across the region, consumer confidence is softening. Point of sales transactions are also softening. When you look at what's happening with the job market in terms of layoffs, you look at the Saudi Arabia market, look at Alger, you look at remittances coming out of Saudi Arabia has dramatically fell in July, which shows you anyone that's selling into particularly the low income end of the segment in Saudi Arabia, they're going to face a pretty difficult end of the year. Then you have cuts to subsidies putting pressure on consumers. In most cases, governments are doing their best to shield their own citizens from that, not least in Kuwait, but that's still certainly an issue. So you've got consumer confidence being impacted through the purchasing power of many of the consumers. So that's a key issue as well. For our companies selling into other businesses, okay, the membership, when we speak to them, particularly in this area, what you're seeing is that the governments are going to continue on with the rationalisation of spending in the region. We speak to GREs, government-related entities, and the name of the game is cost savings. So if you're a company that can help them cut costs or act in a more efficient manner, you're a company that will do well. However, broadly speaking, if the governments are cutting back on spending, that has an impact for B2B and also anybody selling into the government themselves. And on the point, I think this is an important point for a lot of our colleagues in other parts of the world, particularly HQ. What is a really important issue when we talk about selling into governments? A key point to remember is the level of sophistication and the advancement that these governments have experienced in terms of buyers, their capability of buying. The tendering process has become very competitive and the level of sophistication has increased dramatically, not least in Dubai. I would say doing business in Dubai today compared to 5 or 7 years ago is a completely different market.